Tesla isn't planning to launch new models in 2026 to excite buyers. The Model Y Juniper and Model 2 exist for one reason only: to keep system-wide costs from breaking. If you're waiting for major upgrades, radical design changes, or breakthrough tech, this video will likely make you stop waiting. But if you want to understand what Tesla actually changed, what it quietly removed, and why 2026 is about survival, not transformation, this is the full picture. Quick reminder to subscribe and turn on notifications. It helps Auto Gear Shift move past the oddly specific 23,321 subscriber mark. What follows is our most detailed analysis yet of Tesla's 2026 new models. Some points may feel familiar, but the focus here is on the implications most discussions skip. Watch through. The full picture only comes together at the end.
And cars are also extremely safe compared to where they used to be.
Model Y Juniper 2026 doesn't need to be flashy or widely reported to affect owners today. Senior drivers are already feeling the consequences of a model year that stretches nearly 2 years from first delivery to the end of production, creating unexpected uncertainty in resale value. Whether you bought early or late in that cycle, the label 2026 may hide meaningful differences in hardware, software, and real-world performance that directly impact maintenance costs, winter reliability, and the money you could get when selling your vehicle. How much could these hidden differences change your ownership experience? Are some of the recent simplifications in the car's systems actually helping? Or could they be costing you control and information that mattered before? That's what we're breaking down today. Welcome to Auto Gear Shift, the channel that analyzes Tesla beyond the hype. Here we focus on ownership impact, cost predictability, and real-world usability instead of flashy features or Elon's announcements. How is Tesla quietly creating the longest model year in its history? And why should senior owners care? When senior owners check the used car market for a Model Y, the label on the windshield matters more than any press release. The Juniper 2026 refresh illustrates this perfectly. Vehicles delivered as early as January 2025 are all officially classified as 2026 model year. That seemingly small detail carries practical consequences for anyone who already owns a Tesla or plans to sell one within the next few years. Tesla assigns the VIN year code T to 2026 vehicles, and if that code persists until the late 2026 model year transition, the 2026 Model Y could remain in production for 20 to 22 months, far longer than the typical 12-month cycle most automakers follow. From a production perspective, this allows Tesla to maintain consistent assembly lines and scale efficiently. But for senior owners, the result is something less obvious: resale ambiguity. Consider two Model Y vehicles, both labeled as 2026. One was built in early 2025, the other in late 2026. Both share the same model year, but they may differ in hardware tweaks, software maturity, and even subtle adjustments in materials or sensors. On paper, they are identical. In reality, one car could have been sitting in service longer, accumulated slightly different battery cycles, or received early or late software updates that affect long-term usability. That discrepancy directly impacts what a senior owner can expect when selling or trading in their car. The used market tends to value vehicles by model year more than build date. Buyers rarely parse VINs for subtle differences, and even dealerships simplify pricing based on the sticker year. That means an early production 2026 Model Y could sell for less than a late production unit with the same designation, purely because market perception treats them as the same age. For seniors, this creates uncertainty in financial planning, especially when calculating expected returns from a sale in 3 to 5 years. Long model year runs also distort depreciation curves. Typically, each year sees a predictable drop in value, often around $1,500 to $2,500 for a mid-range Tesla after the first year. When a single model year spans nearly 2 years, Depreciation can flatten or jump unpredictably. For senior owners, the predictable stepwise decline in value becomes harder to rely on, affecting everything from retirement budgeting to insurance planning. Another subtle effect involves software and minor hardware updates. Early 2026 vehicles might retain sensors or interior components that Tesla later simplifies or replaces in late 2026 builds. Even minor differences in things like infotainment responsiveness, seat adjustments, or TPMS sensors can affect daily usability. For a senior owner accustomed to a particular interface or feedback system, these hidden variations may introduce small but noticeable inconveniences. Yet, it's not all negative. From an operational standpoint, a longer model year run reduces the frequency of forced software changes and hardware rollouts. This can stabilize maintenance schedules and spare parts availability, which benefits owners who prefer predictable long-term costs. However, the trade-off is that resale value becomes less transparent and more sensitive to build date nuances that casual buyers might overlook. For senior Tesla owners, the key insight is clear. The 2026 label doesn't tell the full story. Understanding the implications of production timing, minor hardware revisions, and the way depreciation curves may behave under a stretched model year is crucial. Documentation, service records, build date verification, and attention to any component changes becomes an essential part of protecting both convenience and financial value. Awareness here isn't about fear. It's about making informed decisions, preserving the usefulness of the car, and maximizing return on an asset that represents a significant investment for most senior owners. In short, the longest model year in Tesla's history isn't just a curiosity for enthusiasts. It's a concrete factor that influences daily usability, long-term costs, and the money you can expect to reclaim when selling your car. Understanding it now gives senior owners an actionable advantage in a market where a single year can mask nearly 2 years of real-world wear, software evolution, and component variation. After acknowledging this, which 2026 Model Y would you rather own, early or late production? Comment early or late if you have a preference, and share why in the comments below. How did Tesla simplify the car at the expense of control? And how does that affect senior owners? Not all changes in the Model Y Juniper are immediately obvious from the outside. One of the most significant updates affects a component that rarely makes headlines: the Tire Pressure Monitoring System, or TPMS. On earlier Model Y and Model 3 vehicles, Tesla used direct TPMS sensors mounted on each wheel, which measured the actual air pressure in pounds per square inch, PSI. In the 2026 Juniper, Tesla switched to a software-based indirect TPMS, relying on wheel speed and ABS sensors to detect low pressure rather than direct measurement. At first glance, this seems like a minor cost-saving measure, but for senior owners, the implications are tangible. Direct sensors provided exact PSI readings for each wheel, visible both in the car and through the mobile app. Any slow leaks or minor deviations were reported immediately, allowing proactive intervention. Indirect sensors, on the other hand, only trigger alerts when the difference in wheel speed suggests underinflation. This method can delay detection, especially for slow leaks, and eliminates visibility of precise PSI values. For a senior driver who has relied on accurate, real-time feedback for years, this change introduces a new layer of uncertainty. On the positive side, the simplification reduces the number of physical components prone to failure. Traditional direct TPMS sensors contain batteries and electronics that degrade over time, often requiring replacement every 5 to 7 years at a cost of $75 to $120 per sensor, depending on service centers and parts availability. By moving to an indirect system, Tesla decreases the likelihood of hardware failures and potentially lowers long-term maintenance expenses. For senior owners, who often prefer predictable costs over complex technical systems, this can be a significant benefit. However, the trade-off between simplicity and transparency is subtle but important. While the risk of hardware failure drops, the loss of precise actionable information can affect confidence in vehicle monitoring. Slow leaks may go unnoticed for days, tire pressure could be slightly off for extended periods, and the driver only sees a general warning instead of an exact number. This changes the ownership experience, shifting the balance from proactive control to reactive awareness. Furthermore, this update reflects Tesla's broader strategy with the Juniper refresh, simplifying the vehicle's hardware architecture and leaning more heavily on software to maintain functionality. For senior owners, the long-term effect is nuanced. Less hardware means fewer service visits and potentially lower repair costs, but it also requires trust in software detection. A senior driver accustomed to direct, visible feedback may need to adapt driving habits or check tire pressure manually to maintain the same level of confidence. Ultimately, the question for senior owners is whether this trade-off is worth it. Those who prioritize predictable maintenance and reduced hardware concerns will find the change beneficial. Those who value detailed, granular data about their car may feel slightly disadvantaged. In a market where every adjustment can subtly affect insurance, resale value, and day-to-day confidence, understanding this shift is critical. Small changes like the TPMS update are not merely technical. They directly shape the perception of safety, reliability, and control, all of which are high priorities for senior owners. By recognizing this pattern of simplification versus transparency, senior drivers can approach the Juniper with informed expectations. The reduced hardware footprint may lower costs and improve stability, but it also emphasizes the need to monitor certain aspects of the car manually. This insight isn't speculative. It comes directly from the technical changes implemented in the 2026 refresh and the logical implications for daily use. For senior owners, awareness of these subtleties is as valuable as understanding battery range or winter traction, because it impacts both comfort and financial decision-making. So, what senior owners should actually do for senior owners. Understanding the subtleties of the Model Y Juniper isn't just an academic exercise. It directly informs practical decisions about how to use, maintain, and eventually sell their vehicle. The combination of a stretched 2026 model year and hardware simplifications like the TPMS update requires an adapted approach to ownership. First, if you plan to keep your Model Y for the long term, recognize that early and late production vehicles may differ in software and component maturity. Checking build dates and service history can help ensure that minor variations won't unexpectedly affect reliability. Maintaining thorough records allows you to preserve both confidence in daily driving and potential resale value when the time comes to sell. Second, monitor critical systems that have been simplified. For example, the shift from direct to indirect TPMS means that slow tire leaks might not trigger immediate alerts. Senior drivers can mitigate this by performing regular manual pressure checks or using a reliable tire gauge at home. This small step preserves a level of control that the car no longer provides automatically, reducing stress while maintaining safety. Beyond tires, staying attentive to software updates, cabin comfort, and battery performance helps ensure the car continues to meet expectations in real-world conditions. Third, consider the timing of any potential sale or trade-in. With a nearly 2-year-long model year, vehicles that appear identical on paper could vary significantly in age, hardware revisions, or software updates. By understanding the nuances of build date and vehicle history, senior owners can position their car more strategically in the used market, avoiding unexpected depreciation and maximizing the return on investment. Awareness here is not about reacting to hype, but about making informed, financially sound decisions. Finally, adapt your expectations to Tesla's broader approach. Simplification reduces maintenance unpredictability, but it also shifts some responsibility back to the driver. Senior owners who appreciate reduced service costs and fewer hardware failures will likely benefit, while those who value precise, granular data must adjust their habits to maintain confidence. At the end of the day, What changes matter most to you as a senior owner? Have you noticed differences in your Tesla over time that affect your confidence or costs? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our latest insights on Tesla ownership and updates. We talked about why buying a used gas car is becoming a riskier decision than it used to be, and where many buyers are quietly losing money without realizing it. We're going one level deeper, because most people don't lose money on cars because they chose the wrong model. They lose money because they didn't see the timing change. Markets don't usually shift when a new product launches. They shift when resale data starts behaving differently. And right now, the resale data from one very common vehicle, the Tesla Model Y, is quietly signaling how the used car market is likely to behave over the next 3 years. This video isn't about EVs versus gas cars. It's not hype, and it's not about predicting a crash. It's about something far more practical. If you plan to buy, sell, or hold a car in the next 24 to 36 months, the rules you've relied on may already be outdated. And the most honest place to see that change isn't headlines. It's resale data. So for the next few minutes, let's step away from opinions and look at where the market actually tells the truth. Here's why resale data matters. Between 2023 and late 2025, 3-year-old Tesla Model Y vehicles consistently retained around 60 to 65% of original MSRP, even as new EV pricing fluctuated. At the same time, many similarly priced gas SUVs, including RAV4 and CR-V models, showed wider resale spreads depending on mileage, region, and timing. That gap isn't about brand loyalty, it's about predictability. When resale values cluster tightly, buyers feel safe. When they scatter, buyers hesitate. And hesitation is what moves markets before headlines ever do. That's why the Model Y isn't just a car in this story. It's a signal. That sounds abstract until you see what actually happened when one vehicle reached real scale. Let's make this personal, not theoretical. By late 2025, resale data across the US shows a very tight pattern for the Tesla Model Y, 3-year-old vehicles. Average mileage around 35,000 to 45,000 miles. Resale values clustering around 60 to 65% of original MSRP. Now here's why that matters to you, not the market. Let's say a buyer purchased a Model Y at $52,000 in 2022 or early 2023. 3 years later, resale prices consistently land between $31,000 and $34,000, depending on region and condition. That's a loss, but it's a known loss. Now compare that to a common alternative your audience actually cross-shops. Take a 2019 to 2020 gas SUV originally priced around $35,000, bought used in 2023 for roughly $22,000. By the time that vehicle reaches 100,000 to 115,000 miles, which happens fast at US average driving rates, resale expectations shift. Listings don't collapse overnight, but buyers hesitate. And when buyers hesitate, sellers start negotiating earlier. Industry transaction data through 2024 to 2025 shows that once these vehicles cross that mileage window, resale outcomes often spread by $3,000 to $5,000 depending on timing, not condition. That spread is the risk. The Model Y's resale curve doesn't just sit higher, it sits narrower. And that difference matters more than people realize, because a narrow resale band means lenders stay comfortable, buyers don't panic, sellers don't race each other to the bottom. Here's the part most people miss. Resale data isn't measuring how good the car is. It's measuring how predictable the exit feels to the next buyer. And right now, the data says this very clearly. Buyers don't see a 3-year-old Model Y as a gamble. They see it as a known quantity. That perception alone is worth thousands of dollars when timing matters. And here's the part most people miss. Those numbers don't just reflect the car. They reflect how buyers feel about risk. Here's something buyers almost never say out loud, but their behavior proves it every time. They don't chase the vehicle that once had the highest resale value. They chase the vehicle that won't surprise them when it's time to sell. That's why, for decades, vehicles like the RAV4, CR-V, and Highlander became the gold standard in the US market. Not because they were exciting, but because their resale curves were boring. A 3-year-old RAV4 didn't just hold value, it held value within a narrow range. So did the CR-V. So did the Highlander. That narrow range mattered more than the headline number, because a vehicle that sometimes sells for $32,000 but sometimes falls to $27,000 feels risky, even if the average looks fine. A vehicle that consistently lands between $29,000 and $31,000 feels safe. And in used markets, predictability is worth more than peak value. This is where the Model Y quietly changed the conversation. It's not being rewarded because it occasionally tops resale charts. It's being rewarded because, by 2024 to 2025, its resale behavior started to resemble the same boring patterns buyers associate with long-trusted gas SUVs: tight pricing clusters, small spreads between best-case and worst-case resale outcomes, fewer surprise drops once mileage and age are accounted for. That's not excitement. That's confidence. And confidence is exactly what lenders, insurers, and second-hand buyers price into the market, long before headlines catch up. So keep this distinction in mind as we move forward. Because markets don't reset when something new looks better. They reset when something new starts behaving as predictably as what buyers already trust. Keep this in mind as we move forward, because this is where the market quietly resets its baseline. This didn't happen overnight. Between 2024 and late 2025, Tesla Model Y crossed a line that very few EVs had reached before. It stopped being an EV choice. It became a normal family vehicle. And that matters more than most people realize. Because when a vehicle becomes normal, the market stops treating it gently and starts treating it honestly. By late 2025, Model Y sales volume placed it consistently among the top-selling vehicles in the U.S. across all powertrains, according to Cox Automotive and Kelley Blue Book. At that scale, buyer psychology changes. Once a vehicle becomes normal, lenders price risk differently. Insurers stop padding uncertainty. Used buyers stop asking what-if questions. And that shift shows up first in resale data, not headlines. Decision trigger number 1. If lenders and insurers stop treating a vehicle as risky, ask yourself this: what happens to the cars they now compare it against? The most important signal in Model Y resale data isn't the headline retention percentage. It's what the market is no longer doing. By late 2025, used Model Y pricing data from Edmunds TMV and IC Cars shows buyers are no longer discounting for battery lifespan fear, EV-specific reliability risk, resale uncertainty beyond 3 to 5 years. That's a structural shift. EV ownership, at this scale, is no longer perceived as experimental. And once EVs become part of the baseline, every vehicle in the same price band gets reevaluated, not emotionally, mathematically. This is where timing starts doing real damage, not to bad cars, but to bad assumptions. Let's ground this in numbers buyers actually face. Model Y, used, real transactions, late 2025. Based on Edmunds TMV, CarGurus transaction data, and IC Cars resale studies. Model year 2022 to 2023. Mileage, 35,000 to 45,000 miles. Original MSRP, typical, approximately $52,000. Actual resale range, late 2025, $31,000 to $34,000. That's a loss, but it's a known loss. The spread between best-case and worst-case resale outcomes is typically $2,500 to $3,000 nationwide once mileage and trim are normalized. Now compare that to what many buyers in your audience actually cross-shop. Gas SUV alternative, RAV4/CRV/Highlander example. A common real-world scenario. Vehicle. 2019 to 2020 RAV4/CRV/Highlander. Original MSRP, approximately $34,000 to $38,000. Bought used in 2023, approximately $21,000 to $24,000. By late 2025, many of these vehicles approach mileage, 100,000 to 115,000 miles. Age, 8 to 10 years. Here's where the risk appears. According to IC Cars and Edmunds transaction data, 2024 to 2025, resale outcomes spread $3,000 to $5,000, depending not on condition, but timing. Days on market increase sharply past 100,000 miles. Price cuts accelerate after initial listing. The car didn't change. Buyer tolerance did. Decision trigger number 2. If two owners drove identical cars, but one sold at 95,000 miles and the other at 115,000, why does one lose $4,000 more without the car being worse? Buyers rarely say this out loud, but their behavior proves it every time. They don't want the car that once had the highest resale value. They want the car that won't surprise them when they sell. That's why, for decades, Toyota RAV4, Honda CR-V, Toyota Highlander became resale benchmarks. Not because they were exciting, but because their resale curves were boring. A 3-year-old RAV4 didn't just hold value. It held value within a narrow range. That narrow band mattered more than the peak. And here's the uncomfortable truth for the used gas market. By 2024 to 2025, Model Y resale behavior started looking boring in the same way. Tight pricing clusters, smaller spreads between best and worst outcomes, fewer surprise drops once mileage is accounted for. That's not hype. That's confidence being priced in. Decision trigger number 3. If predictability is what protected gas SUVs for 20 years, what happens when an EV earns that same trust? Markets don't flip. They reprice risk. Resale data through late 2025 suggests 3 things are likely to continue. 1. Timing will matter more than model vehicles that cross major breakpoints, 100,000 miles or 8 to 10 years, will feel pressure faster. Not because they're worse, but because buyers now have predictable alternatives. A resale window that used to feel safe for 2 to 3 years may now feel safe for 12 to 18 months. The margin for error is smaller. 2. Mid-price used segments. Feel it first. The pressure isn't at 10,000 beaters, and it's not at 70,000 luxury. It's at $18,000 to $28,000, where buyers expect reliability, low surprises, resale protection. That's exactly where Model Y resale data changes the comparison, not by being cheaper, but by being predictable. 3. Depreciation feels sudden, even when it isn't. When buyer risk tolerance changes, listings sit longer, negotiation leverage shifts, price cuts happen earlier. From the outside, it looks like something broke. In reality, the rules changed quietly months earlier. Decision trigger number 4. If depreciation feels sudden, is it really sudden? Or did you just miss the signal? This does not mean gas cars are obsolete. EVs are risk-free. Everyone should switch vehicles. Markets don't deal in absolutes. They deal in relative safety. Used gas cars aren't collapsing. They're becoming timing sensitive. And timing is where most ownership losses happen. If you paused at any point during this video, ask yourself this instead. If you owned your current car today, would you feel confident listing it 12 months from now, or would you quietly hope the market doesn't change before then? Because the market won't punish bad cars next. It will punish bad timing. The Model Y didn't break the market, it revealed it. Resale data is the market speaking honestly. Without marketing, without narratives, and without opinion. And right now, that data is telling us one thing clearly. The next 3 years won't punish bad cars. They'll punish bad timing. Here on Auto Gear Shift, we don't react to headlines. We watch what the numbers do before people notice they've changed. If this video helped you think differently about timing, not just the car, subscribing keeps you ahead of the next shift. And if you want to see how this applies to you, drop your car's mileage and how long you plan to keep it. That alone says more than most price guides ever will. For years, owning a car has quietly become one of the most expensive subscriptions in American life, especially for seniors living on fixed or semi-fixed income. Monthly payments, rising insurance premiums, unpredictable repair bills, and fuel costs don't show up all at once, but over time, they drain financial stability. Now, Tesla is signaling that the 2026 Model Y Juniper refresh may not just be about design or performance. It may be about fundamentally changing how much a car costs to own, year after year. So what exactly is Tesla changing with Model Y Juniper 2026? Can a redesigned electric SUV realistically reduce monthly car bills for seniors? Not in theory, but in everyday use? And how does this compare to gasoline SUVs and even other EVs on the road today? That's what we're breaking down in today's video. How is Tesla rebuilding the Model Y around cost control, not just design? The current Model Y already holds one of the lowest total cost of ownership figures in the mid-size SUV segment. In the US market, a gasoline SUV in the same size class typically burns through around 600 to 700 gallons of fuel per year. At an average fuel price of about $3.60 per gallon, that's roughly $2,200 to $2,500 annually. Before oil changes, transmission servicing, exhaust repairs, or emissions-related failures. By contrast, a Model Y driven the same distance consumes roughly 3,500 to 4,000 kilowatt-hours of electricity per year. Even at a residential rate of 15 cents per kilowatt-hour, that comes out to about $525 to $600 annually. Tesla already erased a major operating cost with electrification. But Juniper appears focused on cutting costs that EVs don't automatically eliminate: insurance, maintenance variability, and depreciation risk. One of the quiet shifts expected with Model Y Juniper 2026 is deeper integration of Tesla's next-generation manufacturing processes. These include expanded use of large structural castings and simplified wiring architectures. While this sounds like factory talk, it directly impacts owners. Fewer parts mean fewer failure points. A simplified wiring system reduces the likelihood of electrical gremlins that often drive up diagnostic costs in modern vehicles, especially as they age past warranty. For seniors, this matters more than performance specs. Repair unpredictability is one of the biggest stressors in vehicle ownership after retirement. A $1,200 surprise repair doesn't just hurt financially, it disrupts planning. Tesla's direction with Juniper suggests an attempt to make the Model Y more appliance-like. Fewer service visits, fewer what-went-wrong moments, and longer stretches of trouble-free driving. Another major cost lever is braking. Regenerative braking already allows Tesla owners to drive 100,000 miles or more on original brake pads. With Juniper expected to further optimize software-controlled region behavior, especially at low speeds, brake wear could be reduced even further. Traditional SUVs often require brake service every 30,000 to 40,000 miles, with typical costs ranging from $400 to $700 per axle. Over a decade of ownership, that alone can exceed $2,000. Insurance is where many seniors currently feel EV pain, not fuel or maintenance. Tesla is expected to continue refining its insurance model alongside Juniper, leveraging vehicle telemetry and driver behavior rather than demographic assumptions. For older drivers with calm driving patterns, this could slowly shift premiums downward over time. While not guaranteed, the direction is clear. Reward predictability. not age brackets. Then there's depreciation, the silent killer of car budgets. Gasoline SUVs face increasing uncertainty as emissions regulations tighten and resale demand shifts. Tesla, on the other hand, is building Juniper around software longevity. Over-the-air updates extend functionality without dealership visits, preserving perceived value even as the vehicle ages. A car that still feels current 5 or 7 years later holds value better than one frozen in time. What does the monthly cost really look like for seniors driving a Model Y Juniper 2026? Start with the vehicle payment itself. Based on current pricing trends and Tesla's cost reductions, analysts expect the Model Y Juniper 2026 to enter the U.S. market in a range between $44,000 and $47,000 before incentives. With the federal EV credit still structured around North American assembly and battery sourcing, many buyers could see an effective price closer to $36,500 to $39,500. For seniors making a modest down payment and financing over 60 months at prevailing rates, that translates into a monthly payment, roughly between $550 and $620. That figure alone already competes with gasoline SUVs that often appear cheaper up front. A Toyota RAV4 or Honda CR-V typically starts in the low $30,000 range, but once financing, dealer markups, and long-term fuel costs are factored in, the monthly reality changes. Fuel alone adds roughly $180 to $210 per month for the average driver. Over 5 years, that becomes more than $10,000, a cost that never builds equity and never goes away. With Model Y Juniper, energy cost replaces fuel. Assuming 1,000 miles per month, a realistic figure for many retirees, electricity consumption would land around 300 to 330 kilowatt hours. At a residential electricity rate of 15 cents per kilowatt hour, that's roughly $45 to $50 per month. Even in higher cost states at 20 cents per kilowatt hour, the monthly energy bill remains under $70. That difference alone frees up over $100 per month compared to gasoline, enough to offset insurance or charging equipment costs. Insurance is where skepticism often emerges, especially among older drivers. Tesla insurance has historically been volatile, but the Juniper generation may quietly benefit from Tesla's evolving risk models. Seniors typically drive fewer miles, accelerate less aggressively, and avoid late-night driving, behaviors that Tesla's telemetry systems can measure. Over time, that can lead to premiums stabilizing rather than climbing. While a traditional SUV might cost $140 to $180 per month to insure, early estimates suggest a calm driving Model Y owner could see premiums settle closer to $120 to $150, depending on state regulations. Maintenance is where Juniper truly begins to feel different. Traditional SUVs require oil changes every 5,000 to 7,500 miles, transmission servicing, spark plugs, belts, and emission components. Even conservative owners spend around $1,200 to $1,500 per year on routine maintenance alone once a vehicle passes its warranty period. The Model Y eliminates nearly all of that. There is no oil, no transmission fluid, no exhaust system, and far fewer wearable parts. Tesla estimates annual maintenance for Model Y at roughly $300 to $400, largely consisting of tire rotations, cabin filters, and brake fluid checks. For seniors who keep vehicles long-term, that difference compounds. Over 10 years, a gasoline SUV can quietly absorb $12,000 to $15,000 in maintenance. A Model Y Juniper is likely to stay closer to $3,500 to $4,000 over the same period. Then there's the cost that doesn't appear on invoices. Time. Seniors value predictability. Fewer dealership visits mean fewer disruptions. Over-the-air software updates replace service appointments. Diagnostics often happen remotely. For many older drivers, that convenience translates directly into peace of mind, a benefit that doesn't show up in spreadsheets, but matters deeply. How can Model Y Juniper 2026 actually reduce long-term risk for seniors who keep cars 8 to 12 years? For many senior drivers, the real question isn't how much a car costs in the first 3 years. It's what happens after year 6, 7, or 10. When warranties expire, resale value becomes uncertain, and repair bills start to feel unpredictable. This is where Model Y Juniper 2026 could quietly change the equation. Battery longevity is often the first concern. Tesla's current battery packs are already showing strong real-world durability. Data from high-mileage Model 3 and Model Y vehicles indicates average capacity loss of about 10 to 12 miles of range after 200,000 miles of driving. For seniors driving 8,000 to 10,000 miles per year, that mileage threshold could take 2 decades to reach. In practical terms, a Juniper battery used primarily for local and regional driving may never experience meaningful degradation within the owner's lifetime of the vehicle. Juniper is expected to benefit from incremental improvements in battery chemistry and thermal management, even if it does not move to full solid-state technology. Better heat distribution and refined charging curves reduce stress on cells, particularly during daily home charging. For seniors who primarily charge overnight at level 2 speeds, battery wear remains minimal. That reduces the likelihood of the single most feared EV expense, out-of-warranty battery replacement. But even here, the numbers matter. A full battery replacement is expensive, often cited between $10,000 and $15,000 today. Yet those figures are misleading without context. Battery failures within the 8-year or 120,000-mile warranty window are rare, and costs continue to decline as Tesla scales production. By the time a Juniper reaches the end of its useful life, replacement pricing is likely lower than today's figures. More importantly, most senior owners will never face that scenario at all. Mechanical risk is where Juniper may outperform traditional vehicles by a wide margin. Gasoline SUVs accumulate complexity over time. Engines wear, transmissions age, emission systems clog, turbochargers fail. Each repair is manageable on its own, but collectively, they introduce uncertainty. EVs like the Model Y simply have fewer moving parts that degrade with age. The motor, inverter, and drivetrain components are sealed and designed for long-term use. Real-world data shows many Tesla drive units exceeding 300,000 miles with minimal intervention. Tesla's shift toward larger structural castings in Juniper also plays a role here. Fewer welded components mean fewer potential fatigue points. That matters for vehicles kept long-term, especially in climates with temperature swings or rough road conditions. Structural simplicity often translates into longevity. Resale value is another overlooked factor for seniors. Many plan to keep a vehicle for as long as possible, but circumstances change. Health, mobility, or family needs can require selling a car later than expected. A vehicle that holds value offers flexibility. Historically, Tesla vehicles have retained resale value better than comparable gasoline SUVs, partly due to demand and partly due to software updates that keep the vehicle feeling modern. Juniper extends that advantage. Tesla's software-first approach means features can improve over time rather than degrade. Infotainment, driver assistance, energy efficiency, and safety features continue to evolve through updates. For a senior owner, that means a car purchased in 2026 may still feel relevant in 2034. That relevance translates directly into resale demand. Finally, there's regulatory risk. Gasoline vehicles face an uncertain future in many regions due to emissions rules and urban restrictions. Seniors don't want to worry about whether their vehicle will be penalized, taxed, or limited in 5 or 10 years. An electric SUV like the Model Y Juniper sidesteps that uncertainty entirely, offering long-term compliance by design. So would you rather keep paying rising fuel, maintenance, and repair bills, or lock in a vehicle where most costs are known up front? Let us know what you think in the comments by typing yes or no. If this breakdown helped you see the numbers more clearly, Hit like, subscribe to Auto Gear Shift, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into real-world Tesla ownership and long-term cost analysis. Tesla is entering a new phase, where the most important clues about its next vehicle no longer come from Elon Musk's tweets or flashy unveilings, but from the factory floor itself. The Tesla Model 2 is shaping up not as a design experiment, but as a manufacturing statement. And that has direct consequences for pricing, especially for seniors watching affordability more closely than ever. Will Tesla's current production strategy finally break the $25,000 barrier without sacrificing reliability? Can a radically simplified assembly line reduce long-term ownership costs enough to outperform gas cars over 10 to 15 years? And what do today's manufacturing signals quietly reveal about who Model 2 is really being built for? That's what we're unpacking today. Why Tesla's production line is the true price setter for Model 2. Most consumers think vehicle pricing is decided late in development, but in reality, price is locked in the moment a production architecture is chosen. For Tesla Model 2, the strongest pricing signals are not coming from design sketches, but from how Tesla is restructuring its manufacturing process from the ground up. Traditional compact cars, including gasoline models in the same size class, typically require between 30 and 40 labor hours per vehicle. This includes stamping, body welding, painting, interior assembly, wiring installation, and final inspection. Labor alone can account for several $1,000s per unit, even before materials are considered. Tesla's next-generation vehicle platform, the same platform expected to underpin Model 2, is engineered to reduce that figure dramatically. Internal manufacturing targets discussed by industry analysts suggest Tesla is aiming for under 10 labor hours per vehicle, with some estimates landing closer to 7 to 8 hours once production stabilizes. Even if real-world results land slightly higher, the reduction compared to legacy automakers is massive. A major contributor to this efficiency is Tesla's expanded use of large structural castings. In the Model Y, Tesla already replaced dozens of stamped and welded components with single-piece aluminum castings. For Model 2, reports indicate this approach is being pushed further, potentially eliminating 200 to 300 individual parts per vehicle in the body structure alone. Each eliminated part removes not only material cost, but also assembly steps, quality checks, fasteners, and potential failure points. When multiplied across hundreds of thousands, or millions, of vehicles annually, this translates into billions of dollars in cumulative cost savings. For seniors, this matters in a very practical way. Vehicles built from fewer parts tend to experience fewer mechanical issues over time. A simpler structure is easier to repair, easier to insure, and less likely to suffer from age-related failures, such as loose connections, corrosion-prone joints, or vibration-induced wear. Another critical signal lies in Tesla's production flow redesign. Unlike traditional assembly lines that move a vehicle through dozens of specialized stations, Tesla's next-generation lines are being optimized for parallel assembly. Subsystems such as the front casting, rear casting, battery pack, and interior module can be built independently and joined later in the process. This reduces bottlenecks and allows Tesla to scale output without proportionally increasing labor. So, based on everything you've just heard, what matters more to you when it comes to vehicle pricing? Comment: factory matters. If you believe how a car is built matters more than design or branding. Comment: price matters if the sticker number is still the only thing that counts for you. And if you want, share why in the comments. We read every single one. Maybe one day you'll see your comment being our video's main topic. What do current factory signals really say about the actual dollar price of Tesla Model 2? To estimate the real-world price of Tesla Model 2, we need to move beyond marketing targets and look directly at what the production line can realistically support. Pricing is ultimately constrained by three core manufacturing variables: battery cost, materials and body structure, and total assembly overhead per unit. Let's start with the battery, because it remains the single most expensive component in any electric vehicle. Based on size, positioning, and weight targets, Model 2 is widely expected to use a battery pack in the range of 40 to 50 kilowatt-hours. That's significantly smaller than the 60 to 75 kilowatt-hour packs used in today's Model Y and Model 3, and closer to what we see in entry-level EVs like the Nissan Leaf. At current industry estimates, battery pack costs for large manufacturers have fallen to roughly $90 to $110 per kilowatt-hour at the pack level. Even if we assume a conservative $100 per kilowatt-hour, a 45 kilowatt-hour battery would cost Tesla around $4,500 to produce. That alone is a reduction of several $1,000s compared to larger Tesla models. Next comes the vehicle body and materials. Tesla's extensive use of aluminum castings significantly reduces steel stamping, welding, and labor-intensive body assembly. Traditional compact cars typically rely on 100 to 150 stamped steel panels, each requiring tooling, welding, and corrosion protection. By replacing many of these with a small number of large castings, Tesla reduces tooling complexity and material waste. Industry manufacturing data suggests that a single large casting can replace between 70 and 100 individual components, depending on design. If Model 2 uses front and rear structural castings similar to, or more advanced than, Model Y, Tesla could eliminate well over 200 parts from the body structure alone. Fewer parts also mean fewer suppliers, shorter logistics chains, and lower inventory costs. Labor remains another critical pricing signal. At an estimated fully burdened labor cost of $60 per hour, reducing labor by 20 hours saves approximately $1,200 per vehicle. Now compare that to competitors. A gasoline Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic typically sells in the $22,000 to $26,000 range before options, but those vehicles rely on complex engines, transmissions, exhaust systems, and emissions components. Over time, these systems add maintenance costs that EVs simply do not have. Electric competitors like the Nissan Leaf, which starts around $28,000, offer similar battery sizes but lack Tesla's manufacturing scale and software ecosystem. The Leaf also uses a more traditional assembly approach and older battery technology, which limits Tesla's ability to compete aggressively on cost. When we combine battery cost around $4,500, reduced body and materials cost, and labor savings exceeding $1,000 per unit, it becomes clear that Tesla can realistically support a Model 2 launch price between $25,000 and $30,000, while still maintaining margin, especially at scale. For seniors, this pricing window is crucial. A Model 2 priced at $27,500, for example, could effectively drop to around $20,000 after federal EV incentives, depending on eligibility. At that level, the vehicle competes not only with new gasoline cars but also with used vehicles, while offering dramatically lower operating costs. How Tesla Model 2's production choices translate into lower ownership costs for seniors? For seniors, the real affordability test of any vehicle doesn't end at the purchase price. What matters far more is how much the car costs to own, operate, and maintain over a long period of time, often 10 to 15 years. This is where Tesla Model 2's production strategy begins to show its strongest advantages. Fuel cost is the most obvious difference. A typical gasoline compact car averaging 30 miles per gallon will consume roughly 333 gallons of fuel per year if driven 10,000 miles annually. At an average fuel price of $3.50 per gallon, that's about $1,165 per year in fuel alone. Over 10 years, fuel costs can easily exceed $11,000, not including price fluctuations. By contrast, an EV like Model 2 would consume roughly 25 to 30 kilowatt-hours per 100 miles, depending on efficiency and driving conditions. At 10,000 miles per year, That equals approximately 2,700 kilowatt-hours annually. At an average residential electricity cost of 15 cents per kilowatt-hour, annual charging costs land near $400. Over 10 years, that's around $4,000, saving seniors roughly $7,000 compared to gasoline. Maintenance costs widen the gap further. Gas vehicles require regular oil changes, transmission servicing, exhaust system repairs, and engine-related maintenance. Industry data suggests average maintenance costs for gasoline vehicles run between $800 and $1,200 per year as vehicles age. Tesla's production simplification eliminates many of these systems entirely. No engine oil, no transmission fluid, no spark plugs, and no exhaust components. Regenerative braking also reduces brake wear dramatically. Many Tesla owners report brake components lasting 100,000 miles or more, particularly for lower mileage drivers, a profile that fits many seniors. Over a decade, maintenance savings alone can realistically reach $5,000 to $7,000, depending on driving habits. Combined with fuel savings, total ownership cost advantages for Model 2 could exceed $12,000 over 10 years. Insurance and repair costs are often a concern, but production simplification helps here as well. Vehicles with fewer parts, standardized castings, and modular components are generally faster and cheaper to repair after minor collisions. As Tesla scales Model 2 production, parts availability and repair familiarity should improve, stabilizing insurance premiums over time. For seniors living on fixed incomes, these numbers matter more than acceleration times or screen size. Tesla Model 2's factory-driven simplicity points to something rare in today's market, a car that isn't just cheaper to buy, but genuinely cheaper to live with. Do you think Tesla can truly keep Model 2 affordable without cutting corners? Would lower fuel and maintenance costs matter more to you than range or performance? Share your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah, I guess the most important thing to do is just...
How does Tesla's 8 gigawatt-hour battery plan at Giga Berlin directly shape Model 2 production in Europe? Tesla has officially confirmed a major expansion of battery manufacturing capacity in Europe, with Giga Berlin at the center of that strategy. André Thierig, Tesla's senior director of manufacturing at the Berlin Gigafactory, stated that the company plans to invest close to 100 million euros to strengthen battery production operations in Germany. The goal is clear and measurable: reach an annual battery output of 8 gigawatt-hours by 2027, a scale that would mark one of Tesla's most serious localization moves in the European market to date. Thierig described the expansion as a decisive step toward full vertical integration and publicly highlighted the move on X, framing it as a transition from battery dependency to in-house control. At present, Giga Berlin produces the Model Y but relies on imported battery cells, primarily from China and the United States, for final vehicle assembly. This reliance exposes Tesla to logistics costs, geopolitical risk, and supply disruptions. By bringing cell production directly onto the Berlin site, Tesla aims to harden its supply chain, reduce transport complexity, and gain tighter control over production planning, an approach that becomes especially relevant as the company prepares lower-cost, high-volume vehicles. Although the 100 million euro figure sounds significant on its own, a Reuters report clarifies that it represents only a portion of a much broader investment cycle. With this new commitment, Tesla's total investment in local battery manufacturing at Giga Berlin now approaches 1 billion euros. In the same communication to Reuters, Tesla included a cautionary note about Europe's industrial environment, stating that in the context of intense international competition from China and the United States, producing batteries economically in Europe is currently almost impossible. The statement underscores the financial pressure facing European manufacturing, even for a company operating at Tesla's scale. Despite these economic headwinds, the decision to push ahead with an 8 gigawatt-hour production target signals a long-term strategic bet on Berlin. For Model 2 in particular, localized battery production is not a side detail but a structural requirement. A mass-market Tesla designed around aggressive cost targets cannot rely indefinitely on imported cells without sacrificing margins or pricing flexibility. By moving battery production closer to vehicle assembly, Tesla increases the feasibility of producing Model 2 in Europe at scale, while keeping Giga Berlin increasingly self-sufficient as the company's only European Gigafactory moves into its next growth phase. What do Elon Musk and Tesla's AI chief reveal about fully driverless robo-taxi progress? Tesla CEO Elon Musk and AI director Ashok Ellaswamy recently offered a rare glimpse into the state of the company's fully driverless robo-taxi program, sharing personal experiences from rides without safety supervisors or anyone in the driver's seat. On Christmas Eve, Musk described the system as delivering perfect driving across Austin, while Ellaswamy posted a 2-minute video from the back seat, calling it an amazing experience. These executive-level tests highlight just how rapidly Tesla is advancing toward its goal of autonomous, unsupervised urban taxi service, a technological foundation that will directly benefit the upcoming Model 2. Before these posts, images of Tesla vehicles operating without a driver on public streets had circulated widely on social media. One such vehicle was spotted in Austin, Texas, and Musk confirmed, "Testing is underway with no one in the car." In his Christmas Eve post, he detailed his own first-hand ride. "A Tesla with no safety supervision system, and me in the passenger seat took me all over Austin on Sunday with perfect driving." Ellaswamy's accompanying video showed the front seats completely empty, while the car navigated real traffic smoothly, emphasizing both system reliability and ride comfort. Tesla is also actively addressing a recurring challenge in full self-driving FSD technology, camera glare caused by bright sunlight. While Tesla's vision-based system is impressive, direct sunlight can interfere with daily operation, creating visual noise that even human drivers often mitigate using sunglasses or sun visors. Tesla has recently filed a patent aimed at resolving this issue through a novel anti-glare panel. According to the patent, Tesla vehicles rely heavily on cameras to navigate and interpret their surroundings, and maintaining clear visibility is crucial for precise operation. The patent describes a textured surface composed of arrays of microscopic cones that scatter incoming light in multiple directions, reducing glare and improving camera perception. These microcones are optimized for size, angle, and orientation to minimize total hemispherical reflection while enhancing image interpretation accuracy. Additionally, a mechatronic system can dynamically adjust the cone's orientation based on external light sources. This patent was first reported by Not a Tesla app, and while it represents a major step, Tesla is also exploring other methods such as direct photon counting. As Musk explained during the Q2 earnings call, "We use direct photon counting. When you view an image generated from the silicon photon counter and process it through digital or image signal processors, the image may appear washed out if the camera faces the sun." Future hardware versions, including hardware 5 and 6, may incorporate enhanced solutions like neutral density filters or heated lenses to further mitigate glare. For decades, buying a used gas car was considered the safest financial move in America. Lower upfront cost, slower depreciation, predictable ownership. That assumption held until recently. Starting around 2024 and becoming clearer in 2025, the math began to change. Not because gas cars stopped working, not because reliability suddenly collapsed, but because the risk profile shifted. And two Tesla-driven forces accelerated that shift faster than most buyers expected: Tesla's Model Y, and growing market expectations around a lower-cost Tesla often referred to as Model 2. Whether or not that vehicle arrives exactly as rumored is almost beside the point. What matters is that the market is already adjusting as if it might. Depreciation is no longer behaving the way it used to, and many buyers are still making decisions based on outdated rules. If you had $20,000 in cash today, Would you instinctively trust a 7-year-old gas car? Or pause for a second? That pause is exactly what this video is about. And to understand why this matters, we have to start with the boring part. The math buyers used to trust. For most of the past 2 decades, buying a used gasoline car was supported by measurable data, not just habit. Pricing data through the late 2000s and early 2000s consistently showed that once a gas vehicle reached 5 to 6 years of age, depreciation slowed to a relatively narrow range. By 2023 to 2024, mainstream sedans such as the Toyota Camry and Honda Accord typically retained 46 to 52% of their original MSRP at the 7-year mark, assuming average mileage. That pattern largely held across the states where most buyers live, including California, Florida, and Texas. In California, a 2017 Toyota Camry with around 85,000 to 95,000 miles still traded in the $12,500 to $14,000 range as of early 2024, reflecting a depreciation rate of roughly 6% per year beyond year 5. In Florida, similar vehicles showed slightly stronger value retention, often 48 to 53% of original MSRP, due to lower corrosion exposure and historically stable fuel pricing. And in Texas, depreciation curves were even flatter for sedans and compact SUVs, with many 7-year-old vehicles retaining close to half their original value, particularly in suburban markets. And it wasn't just resale value. The day-to-day costs were just as predictable. Maintenance costs followed an equally predictable curve. Industry service data, through 2024 to 2025, shows that until approximately 90,000 miles, annual maintenance and repair expenses for mainstream gas sedans typically remained within the $900 to $1,300 per year range. That meant owners could reasonably forecast fuel costs, routine service, resale value, with relatively little uncertainty. This combination, slow depreciation and predictable ownership costs, is what earned used gas cars their reputation as the safe financial choice. This wasn't perception. It was a repeatable pattern. But that pattern only holds when the world stays the same. And 2024 didn't exactly cooperate. The limitation of that logic is simple. It only holds when buyers lack credible alternatives in the same price range. By late 2025, that condition no longer consistently applies, especially in California, Florida, and Texas, where EV adoption and charging coverage have accelerated faster than the national average. So, what actually changed first? It wasn't a rumor. It was a real car people bought. Before talking about expectations around a lower-cost Tesla often referred to as Model 2, it helps to look at what has already happened, because this shift didn't start with a rumor. It started with a real high-volume vehicle. By 2024 and continuing through 2025, the Model Y became one of the highest-selling passenger vehicles in the United States across all powertrains. Not just among EVs, across the entire market. At that level of volume, something important changed. The Model Y stopped being seen as an early adopter product and became a reference point, a normal family vehicle. And the fastest way to see that shift is resale, because resale is basically the market's lie detector. That normalization shows up most clearly in resale behavior. By late 2025, transaction data indicates that a 3-year-old Model Y with average mileage typically retained around 60 to 65% of its original MSRP, depending on region and usage. In California, 3-year-old Model Y vehicles with roughly 35,000 to 45,000 miles commonly transacted in the low to mid $30,000 range, placing retention toward the upper end of that band. In Florida, resale values were slightly lower, but still clustered near 58 to 62%, reflecting fewer incentives but steady demand for low-maintenance vehicles. And in Texas, where gasoline SUVs have traditionally dominated, Model Y resale values often landed within a few percentage points of comparable vehicles like the RAV4 or CR-V, once mileage and trim were accounted for. The significance here isn't that the Model Y outperformed every gas vehicle. It's that it performed as well as vehicles buyers already trusted. That quietly reset expectations. Be honest, did you expect an EV to hold value like that just a few years ago? A lot of buyers didn't either. Once buyers accept that an EV can be reliable as a daily driver, predictable in ownership cost, and competitive in resale value, the comparison framework changes. Used gas cars are no longer compared only to other used gas cars. They're compared to what a buyer could choose instead. But the Model Y still lived in a price range that kept much of the used gas market insulated. And that's the key limitation. Because the real pressure isn't at $40,000. It's down where used cars actually sell. What changes the risk calculation isn't normalization alone. It's when that normalization moves down into the same price band where used gas cars actually sell. That's where market expectations around a lower-cost Tesla, commonly referred to as Model 2, begin to matter. Not because of any single feature, and not because the vehicle is confirmed, but because of where it is widely expected to land. Based on Tesla's public statements around affordability, supplier activity, and manufacturing cost trends through late 2025, industry expectations broadly place a lower-cost Tesla near the $25,000 price point before incentives. And that price point doesn't compete with new gas cars. It competes with the used cars people actually buy. For context, that overlaps almost perfectly with the core of the used gas car market. In California, used gasoline sedans and compact SUVs priced between $18,000 and $24,000 represent a large share of transactions, particularly vehicles from model years 2017 to 2019 with 80,000 to 110,000 miles. In Florida, buyers cluster in a similar band, often between $17,000 and $23,000, with slightly higher mileage tolerance. And in Texas, suburban buyers routinely shop between $16,000 and $22,000, prioritizing size and perceived durability over technology. Historically, buyers in this segment didn't cross-shop new vehicles. They compared used Camry to used Accord, or used RAV4 to used CR-V. That comparison framework is what protected resale values. Quick check. Comment your state below. Because this next part looks very different depending on where you live. A new vehicle entering this price conversation changes that framework, not because every buyer switches, but because enough buyers pause. At similar purchase prices, ownership costs begin to diverge. Using conservative 2025 averages, gasoline vehicles in this range typically face fuel costs of 14 to 15 cents per mile in California, 10 to 11 cents per mile in Florida, and 8 to 9 cents per mile in Texas. Once mileage crosses 90,000 miles, annual maintenance costs commonly rise toward $1,400 to $1,800 per year, depending on usage and service history. By comparison, EV operating costs cluster differently. Electricity costs in 2025 typically translate to 8 to 9 cents per mile in California and 4 to 5 cents per mile in Florida and Texas, with lower variance in annual maintenance before high mileage. The key difference isn't that one option is always cheaper, it's that cost predictability improves. And this is where depreciation gets sneaky. Predictability reduces perceived risk, and reduced risk supports value. Depreciation doesn't respond to averages. It responds to hesitation. When a buyer at $20,000 hesitates, even briefly, resale dynamics begin to shift. Listings sit longer, price cuts appear sooner. Sellers aren't just competing with other used cars anymore. They're competing with what buyers believe might soon be available. This is how Model 2 affects the used gas market before it exists. Not as a product, but as an expectation. And that effect doesn't spread evenly. Risk concentrates by mileage, by timing, and by owner situation, which is where the differences between owners begin to matter. If you're thinking, I'm safe, I'm keeping my car forever, hold that thought. This next section is where timing really shows up. Welcome back. Let's pick up exactly where we left off. We're going one level deeper, because most people don't lose money on used cars because they bought the wrong model. They lose money because they didn't see the breakpoint coming. And that's where Tesla's Model Y and growing expectations around a lower-cost Tesla, often referred to as Model 2, quietly reshape the math. This video isn't about EVs versus gas cars. It's about timing, psychology, and depreciation traps that most buyers still don't realize exist. Most buyers think depreciation works like a slope, a little loss every year, predictable, gradual, manageable. In reality, depreciation behaves more like a staircase. Cars don't lose value evenly. They hold, then they drop. Those drops happen at specific moments, not because the car suddenly becomes worse, but because the next buyer starts thinking differently. That moment is called a depreciation breakpoint. For example, a 2017 Toyota Camry with around 95,000 miles may still trade steadily in many U.S. markets. But once that same car crosses roughly 105,000 to 110,000 miles, listings often sit longer, and sellers begin cutting prices, even if nothing about the vehicle itself has changed. And breakpoints are rarely mechanical. They're psychological. The engine doesn't know when it passes 100,000 miles, but buyers do. The car doesn't suddenly fail when it turns 8 years old. But lenders, insurers, and shoppers all change how they see it. Industry pricing data through 2024 and into 2025 shows that once a mainstream gas sedan crosses a major breakpoint, typically mileage or age, the difference at resale is no longer measured in a few $100s. It's often measured in several thousand, simply because the buyer pool shrinks and price sensitivity rises. For decades, these breakpoints existed, but they were widely understood and slow-moving. That's why used gas cars felt safe. What's changed isn't that breakpoints are new. It's that new alternatives are shifting where those breakpoints hit, and how sharply. And once those alternatives enter the same price range as used gas cars, the breakpoint doesn't just arrive sooner. It arrives faster. Now that we know what a depreciation breakpoint is, the real question becomes where it actually hits. There are three major depreciation breakpoints that matter most in today's market. Two are old, one is new. 1. The mileage breakpoint, 100,000 to 120,000 miles. Historically, crossing 100,000 miles didn't destroy value, but it narrowed the buyer pool. Before 2020, a 7 to 8-year-old Toyota Camry or Honda Accord with around 105,000 miles would still attract practical buyers planning to keep the car for years. By 2023 and into 2025, that behavior began to shift. Once mainstream gas vehicles cross roughly 110,000 miles, several things start happening at the same time. Insurance premiums trend higher. Extended warranty options largely disappear, and financing terms become shorter or more expensive. Industry pricing data through 2024 to 2025 shows that after this mileage point, resale price sensitivity increases sharply, especially for owners planning to sell within the next 24 to 36 months. In many U.S. markets, the difference between selling at 95,000 miles versus 115,000 miles is no longer a few $100s. It's often $2,000 to $4,000, even when the vehicle's condition hasn't materially changed. The car didn't change. The buyer's tolerance did. 2. The age breakpoint, 8 to 10 years. Age used to be forgiving. A 10-year-old Camry wasn't scary, it was proven. But by the mid-2020s, age started interacting with a new variable: technology expectations. Buyers increasingly associate newer vehicles, especially EVs, with fewer mechanical failure points, lower maintenance uncertainty, and more predictable ownership costs. That doesn't suddenly make older gas cars unreliable, but it does make them comparatively riskier in the buyer's mind. By 2024 to 2025, pricing data shows that once mainstream gas vehicles cross the 8 to 10-year mark, discounting accelerates even at moderate mileage. Not because the car stopped working, but because buyers start asking a different question: is this the last big repair before I sell? That question alone moves prices. 3. The comparison breakpoint, the new one. This is the breakpoint most buyers still don't see coming. For decades, used gas cars were compared only to other used gas cars. A used Camry was compared to a used Accord. A used RAV4 was compared to a used CR-V. That closed comparison loop protected resale values. But starting around 2024 and accelerating through 2025, that framework began to break. Buyers shopping in the $18,000 to $25,000 range started comparing used gas cars to something else: lightly used EVs, heavily discounted EVs, and increasingly, the expectation of a new, lower-cost EV entering the market. This comparison breakpoint doesn't require mass adoption. It doesn't require everyone to switch. It only requires hesitation. When buyers pause, even briefly, listings sit longer, price cuts come faster, and sellers lose leverage. That's how the comparison breakpoint works, and it's exactly where vehicles like the Model Y and growing expectations around a lower-cost Tesla, often referred to as Model 2, begin reshaping depreciation before a single new car is sold. Let's make this practical. Depreciation breakpoints don't look identical everywhere, but across the US, they follow the same pattern, only the timing changes. Where alternatives show up sooner, breakpoints arrive earlier. Where buyers hesitate later, drops come harder. Here's how that plays out in real markets. Markets where breakpoints show up first. In states with higher EV visibility, stronger charging networks, or higher fuel costs, buyers start comparing earlier. By late 2025, a common pressure point looks like this: used gas sedans priced roughly $18,000 to $24,000, typically 2017 to 2019 model years. Mileage between 80,000 and 110,000 miles. In these markets, buyers don't just compare one used car to another anymore. They also look at lightly used EVs, discounted EV inventory, and the expected operating cost difference over the next few years. Fuel costs make the comparison more obvious. In higher-cost fuel states, gasoline ownership often runs 14 to 15 cents per mile, while electricity for EVs lands closer to 8 to 9 cents per mile. That gap doesn't automatically make EVs the better choice, but it does something just as important: it slows decisions. And when buyers slow down, resale values soften. Listings stay up longer. Price cuts happen sooner. Once vehicles approach 100,000 miles, breakpoints arrive with less warning. Markets with higher mileage tolerance. In many parts of the country, buyers are more comfortable with mileage. Used vehicles priced $17,000 to $23,000 with 95,000 to 115,000 miles still move, especially when condition looks solid. But here's the pattern that shows up repeatedly across the US. These markets don't avoid depreciation breakpoints. They delay them. Once vehicles cross key mileage thresholds, often 110,000 to 120,000 miles, resale sensitivity increases quickly. Fuel may be cheaper in these regions, but buyers start focusing on, upcoming maintenance uncertainty, resale timing, and whether they're buying into the last stable year of ownership. Value doesn't fade gradually. It adjusts once confidence breaks. Traditionally gas-friendly markets, even in regions where gasoline vehicles dominate, the pattern still holds. Used SUVs priced $16,000 to $22,000 with 100,000 plus miles can hold value well, until buyers start cross-shopping alternatives of similar size and price. Once that comparison enters the decision, price drops accelerate. Negotiation leverage shifts. Resale protection weakens faster than owners expect. Fuel cost alone doesn't drive this shift. Predictability does. And when buyers begin factoring long-term predictability, not just upfront price, breakpoints move faster than they used to. What this means nationwide. Breakpoints don't hit every state at the same moment, but they follow the same logic everywhere. They arrive sooner where alternatives are visible, hit harder where buyers hesitate, and concentrate risk where owners expect resale value to do the protecting. That's why this isn't a California story, or a Florida story, or a Texas story. It's a timing story, and it plays out nationwide. And that brings us to the most important question of all. Who actually feels this first? And who still has time? It started with volume. By 2024 and continuing through 2025, the Tesla Model Y became one of the highest-selling passenger vehicles in the United States, across all powertrains. At that scale, something important happened. The Model Y stopped being an early adopter vehicle. It became normal. And when a vehicle becomes normal, the market treats it very differently. That normalization shows up most clearly in resale data. By late 2025, 3-year-old Model Y vehicles, with average mileage between 35,000 and 45,000 miles, typically retained 60 to 65% of original MSRP. For context, that places Model Y squarely in the same retention range as many well-regarded gas SUVs in its price class, not above them, but no longer below them either. Across different regions, the pattern is consistent. Some markets skew slightly higher, others slightly lower. But once mileage and trim are accounted for, resale behavior clusters tightly, which is exactly what you expect from a vehicle the market considers predictable. The significance here isn't that the Model Y outperformed everything else. It's that it performed as well as vehicles buyers already trusted. That's what reset expectations. Once buyers accept that an EV can be reliable as a daily driver, predictable in ownership cost, and stable in resale value, the comparison framework changes permanently. At that point, EVs are no longer the alternative. They become part of the baseline. And once the baseline shifts, every vehicle in the same price band gets reevaluated, even before a new competitor ever shows up. Now we need to be precise. This isn't about confirming a vehicle. It's about how markets react to expectations, not rumors, but pricing expectations. Through late 2025, a combination of public affordability targets, supplier cost trends, and manufacturing direction has broadly anchored the idea of a future lower-cost Tesla in the $25,000 price class, before incentives. Whether that vehicle launches exactly as rumored is secondary. What matters is that buyers behave as if it might. At that price level, the comparison moves directly into the core of the used gas market, not at the edges, but right at the center. For a buyer looking at a 7-year-old gas car priced around $18,000 to $22,000, the question quietly changes. It's no longer just, is this a good car? It becomes, do I buy this now, or do I wait and see what the market looks like in a year? That single question changes timing. And timing is everything in resale markets. Hesitation compresses resale windows. It narrows the pool of confident buyers, and it forces sellers to compete earlier than they planned. Depreciation doesn't respond to averages. It responds to doubt. And doubt spreads faster than facts. Here on Auto Gear Shift, we don't chase hype. We focus on ownership reality, especially when the numbers quietly shift. Tesla's 2026 lineup isn't about what's new on the surface, it's about what quietly changed underneath. Model Y Juniper and Model 2 don't redefine the product line. They redefine timing, cost, and risk for buyers. If this breakdown helped you see the strategy more clearly, there are more analyses like this coming. Until then, thanks for watching, and we'll pick this up in the next one.